Alright everyone, now it's time to talk about the America First, sort of the populist, libertarian, nationalistic fusion that we're seeing, which is loosely overlapped with the GOP in some ways, but you still have a bunch of neocon dross in the party and stuff. And of course, people who believe more in the libertarian side of it, as opposed to more in the nationalistic side, they tend to clash on moral issues especially, as well as some others. But generally speaking, here's some advice, and this is sound strategic advice. If America First, if the idea of a government by the people that actually represents the average person, as opposed to representing foreign interests or rich people or some identity block that just happens to be artificially concocted every election season and then the day later promptly forgotten, which is what both Democrats and Republicans have typically done. If it's going to succeed, it's not going to be a top-down approach. It's not going to work. The top is already too corrupt. The federal government's already been overrun. The only way that you're going to permeate that, to puncture that echo chamber, with regards to anyone other than a handful of mavericks, you've got the Rand Pauls, arguably a Joe Manchin in some cases. You have a handful of those people, but they're few and far between. The way to do it is from the bottom up. It's less exciting. It's also a lot easier. Voting in local elections, the voting turnout tends to be abysmal, except in very small town localities where there's a lot of community cohesion. In which case the community tends towards the more traditionalistic side of politics usually anyway. It's probably not a socialistic town that you're talking about. What you should do is take over local school boards, get rid of the wokeness and so forth, get rid of the indoctrination, the Marxism in schools. That's easy. They did it in Fort Worth like last week. Take over the housing authorities because they determine what rules you can live by. If you want to have like a populist, if you want to have like a quasi-Volkish, and I don't mean that in the racialistic blood and soil sense, but just like having a people that are together and have a community. If you want to have like a movement like that and have home gardening and stuff and local trade to bypass the materialistic, globalistic, corrupt system, you got to get rid of the housing authorities' power first, because usually they won't even let you plant a garden. Maybe a few plots in the backyard, but they'll come and snoop around in your garbage to make sure that you're not growing too many organic string beans, actually. You have to maintain your lawn, you have to mow it every once in a while, use chemicals and shit, kill off the bees. Now, if you want to get rid of it, take over the housing authorities. Just do that. Take over the mayoral offices. If you've got 200-300 people voting in the average mayoral election and you get 200 or 300 people to vote for a specific candidate earmarked by your local group to try to get rid of the old one that's corrupt and try to reform things, if you want to get rid of the old city council, the old town clerk or whatever, and get new ones in, take them over. These people have a disproportionate force in your life. Local sheriffs. If they're not being accountable to the community, if they're not standing for the Constitution, which is literally their job, kick them out. Get a new sheriff in town. One that will say, no, I'm not going to enforce unconstitutional orders, and I'm going to enforce the Constitution insofar as my power allows. Then, once you've got those localities, and trust me, in small town America, it wouldn't even be hard. You can organize this. Don't just do it on the internet. Organize locally. Use local groups that are on the internet, fucking Craigslist or something, and get people together and go out and canvass and fucking do it. It'll take footwork. It's not, real activism is not, I did a change.org petition. That may change someone's mind, but that person might be in Bangladesh. They're not voting in your mayoral election. Once you've taken over some localities, which you can do literally over the next year, with relatively little total organization and manpower, trust me, then once you've cleaned house there and begun to reform things at the grassroots level, this would require only maybe 3 or 4% of the whole U.S. population to pull off in most localities in the small towns. Now, leave the cities alone. Fuck them. Fuck the cities. Then you go after the state level. Well, again, turnout tends to be pretty low in a lot of state elections. So, field your own candidates. Maybe you run for office, raise a little money, knock on doors, canvass, get people registered to vote. You can do this. It is legal. It is relatively simple. Some of you don't have a job. Well, then become a full-time canvasser. Sleep in the fucking political office if you have to. Do what you need to do. If you really think that our country is headed off a cliff, when some people agree with that, then do something about it. The country is in the wane. Over the course of the next 4 years, before the next election, you have the opportunity to basically overhaul the entire electoral structure as well. The states handle the elections, not the federal government. And with Manchin standing in the way of the idea of federalizing elections, which, by the way, would be a constitutional crisis and wouldn't work anyway, take over some state governments. Make sure the elections in your states are fair. There are a hell of a lot of rural states. You get the Free State Project in New Hampshire already beginning to flip local councils as we speak. They've already taken over chunks of New Hampshire. The New Hampshire state government's like, oh, I don't understand what's happening. This is terrible. There's tens of thousands of libertarians here all of a sudden. Well, maybe you have a few states where libertarians move to, a few other states where populists move to. Maybe you have a state where people that have more civic nationalist views tend to congregate. Take over 5 or 6 states. You get the population to do that. Use those state governments and the senators and representatives, the governors, to exercise power, to make sure that your self-determination is respected. To nullify gun control, to nullify attacks on the First Amendment, to weaponize the state's legal apparatus against monopolistic businesses that try to censor you. You have the ability to do this, but it requires a ground-up approach that I see in some cases is absent from modern activism. People started in the 2000s doing Facebook pages and stuff for activism, like anti-war purposes, and then they got hooked on that and they don't realize that that alone is not enough. It can lead to change, but only if it leads to some real-world behavior. If people want populism, if they want to have fair trade, if they want to have their rights, if they want to exercise them properly, and go back to having a United States that is dignified, that is willing to defend itself but is not willing to waste trillions of dollars invading some country for no goddamn reason, if they want limited taxation, if they want to be able to speak freely and do so without repercussions, if they want law and order so rioters get swept off the streets, they're going to have to start at the local level. You can't just say, well, I'm going to vote in the presidential election. Trump will take care of it all. You didn't give Trump a Congress he could work with. You didn't give him states that he could work with. Now, of course, the movement continues now, but it's a slow process. If it had been done in the first place, as was suggested by myself and others at the time, we'd be far further ahead. Things would be way more cheerful, and there'd be more of a roadblock against Beijing Biden's tyranny. The fascist is literally trying to outsource anti-Fourth Amendment surveillance on U.S. citizens to private groups. The OAN just got a thing from the DOJ trying to shut down the Arizona audit. The DOJ! The federal government, which is not supposed to do anything about local and state elections. The states are supposed to handle it. It's worse than the AP spying scandal. I'm going to be doing a Substack article later today on this very topic. By the way, I'll be doing a third video today. Actually, I've joined Substack in order to write more journalistic, actually sourced articles that go beyond my video content. Something terse, a few paragraphs that you can easily digest once or twice, maybe a week, a few times a month. This is what you need to do. Start on the local level. The localities inform the state. The states control the elections and can throttle the federal government. We get a 10th Amendment. Most of the laws you suffer under are state level. A lot of your taxes are state level. Well, the states are fully capable of nullifying a lot of what the federal government does. Look at gun control. State of Maryland. The localities refuse to enforce the magazine restrictions, so it's essentially a blue law. It's also unconstitutional. If you look at states with regards to marijuana, the federal government says it's still illegal. You can't have pot. It's federally illegal. It's a federal crime. Do they enforce it? No, they don't give a shit. Because the states, if they legalize, what are they going to do? The feds are going to come in to bust every pothead? They don't have the resources. The federal government, thankfully, is hamstrung by the 10th Amendment in most cases. And the municipalities and individualities also have additional rights and privileges that the federal government simply doesn't share. Thank goodness. So look at the local level. Clean up your communities first. Activism requires that you be on your feet, not on your ass. That's about all. Peace out.